I've made essentially all my closest friends now are people that I met through blogging. That there's yeah, I mean, and of course, there's my friendship with Scott, my friendship with Amanda, who's one of my best friends in the world. It's essentially all my closest friends are from the blogosphere.
This is the Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast. I'm Scott Lemieux, and I am joined by Robert Farley, and we have a very special guest as part of our History of the Blogosphere series, and that is Lindsay Bayerstein, the prolific author who started out with Majikthise. Is how you. This used to be one of the great debates. I just how to pronounce it. Yeah, but
I can explain that.
Yeah, of course. This is one of the questions we're setting up. Yes, exactly. Who is joining us? I assume from Brooklyn.
Yep, sunny Brooklyn, New York.
Yes, and I will lead this in with a story, which is that the first time I visited Brooklyn after moving to New York in 2004 was to meet Lindsay and her partner Darcy, who has arranged a fantastic new jazz album. Maybe we should conclude with that. And I took the subway to Court Street and was just looking for cross streets or meeting at a bar on Atlantic Avenue. And I thought, oh, Fulton Street intersects with Atlantic Avenue, of course. For people who know Brooklyn, Fulton Street, cuts across in a diagonal, mostly east. So I turned a third of a mile walk into a 3.5 mile walk in pouring rain. So that was my the days before Google Maps. Everybody,
Wait. No, Scott, you were in Lexington like 2 months ago, and you walked the wrong direction on Main Street for how many blocks before you decided to turn around? So this is not a Google Maps issue for you.
No, that's a very fair point. Yes, that is true. It is, but it is mostly my own ineptitude. But at least this time I did turn around after recognizing that it was that it was south north, whereas that was I was in for a dime. So yes, so I've gotten better about my. I've turned 45-minute mistakes into 5-minute mistakes, so it's getting it. So hopefully next time will be good. But anyway, I did finally make it to the waterfront and got to meet Lindsay Darcy, and we've been friends ever since. Lindsay was also part of the sort of salon we used to have at the dearly departed Ginger Man in Midtown. During my time in New York, which I know Rob, you visited. So it's particularly special, in other words, to have Lindsay with us, and it'll be great to sort of go through some old history and to catch up. So Lindsay, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So I think the best thing is just start us off with your as one of the original bloggers, just to sort of start off with your origin story and how you got into the mostly political, but you've also obviously had a lot of other interests as well and so you're also part of both the political and the feminist blogosphere and how you sort of came into that.
Well, I started my blog because I was angry that George W. Bush got elected. And because I was bored, because I'd finished my master's program in philosophy and I was working in pharmaceutical advertising while I waited to apply for PhD programs. And the blog was great because in pharmaceutical advertising, jobs circulate, and a lot of time your work is off with somebody else and it won't be back with you for another hour or so you can write a blog post. So it was a perfect diversion. And gradually the blog became more and more important to me. And for various reasons, I didn't end up going to grad school, but I ended up becoming a journalist because of the blogging. People started offering me opportunities to write for money, and one thing led to another, and that ended up being my career.
So you'll forgive me for forgetting sort of exactly what the time frame was. Right? Mainly, I remember the iteration of the blog where it was like you had the picture with yourself and the Johnny Cash T-shirt, and that was like sort of the header for the longest time. But that's how I always thought about you. But could you go into a little bit more detail about sort of when you started, what platform you used, and then sort of how that became more professional over time?
Sure. What happened? I started blogging on TypePad under the name Majikthise because I was working on my PhD applications for philosophy, and Majikthise was the head philosopher in the Hitchhiker's Guide series, who's trying to organize a union of philosophers, and that seemed like an apt theme for my blog that was going to be kind of lefty, kind of political, kind of philosophical. And I was basically on TypePad for my whole run as a blogger until probably around 2012 or something when a site called the Big Think offered to move me over to and write for them, and that didn't end up working out very well. So I kind of that was basically sort of
I'd
the end
completely
of the
forgotten
blog.
about them. Yeah.
But yeah, I was on TypePad the whole way through. Still got my subscription, ride or die TypePad.
Is the site still up?
Yeah, I think it should be.
Oh, cool.
I forget whether I have it set to public or not, but I assume I do.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, and that's sort of an interesting so that again, and that's something that we all went through, that when as bloggers we got some attention, and then we got some opportunities, and sometimes with sites that were enduring, and sometimes less so, which seems to be your first experience. When did you start working for the Sidney Hillman Foundation?
I started working with Sidney Hillman probably around that same time, around 2012. No, let's see. Yeah, that's about right, about 2012. And I've been running their monthly awards program, the Sydney Awards. I want to encourage everybody to send. It's free to apply. It's a monthly award for investigative journalism in the public interest. And then we also do an annual prize called the Hillman Prizes. And those are also for investigative journalism in various genres.
Yeah, so I don't think you're working for them, because I actually got to go to the Hillman Awards one year because Tapped won the Blog of the Year award when I was writing for them.
Oh, that's right. I was their photographer that year.
Yes,
And
yeah.
then
So
the following year, I started working for them. That's right.
yeah, so I handed a plate at the buffet to Harry Belafonte, and met Danny Glover, and trying to Walter Mosley, the LA. So that was a very cool event. That was a lot of fun. Iglesias and Ann Friedman and Ezra and all the old Tap crew came down from New York, and it was the ceremony at the W in Union Square. That was that was fun. So I knew you were associated with Hillman at that, but I didn't realize you weren't actually part of the of their awards committee until later. But that is, for people in New York, that's actually a fun that's actually a really fun event. So it's we're checking out the annual dinner if you can.
So, Lindsay, if I recollect correctly, you did some, one of the sort of the biggest, I wouldn't call it you broke a story, but you were extremely active around Katrina, and you actually went to New Orleans. Am I recollecting that correctly?
Yeah, it was this group of people. The Rappaport Foundation had set aside some funding to send some bloggers down to cover the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And Matt Stoller, I think his brother, was getting married fairly soon after the trip was supposed to end, but he wasn't convinced. His brother wasn't convinced that Matt was going to get back in time for the wedding if he went. So I got Matt's spot, and we went. And
one of the greatest trades in journalism history. Anyway.
And so we made some fake press credentials so that we get through the checkpoint, and actually did end up the NAACP in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, graciously allowed us to pitch tents in their backyard and come in and use their internet. So we were able to write about what was going on the ground after Katrina. Met some Blackwater guys. Unfortunately, I don't think any of them was Graham Flatner.
No, I was going to say that was exactly what I was going to ask next. You're
going to break more news here.
But yeah, that was a really intense and impactful trip. It really shaped me as a reporter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was remarkable. And I believe you've also known another one of the participants in the series, Amanda Marcotte. I think you've known for even going back to her Mouse Words days, if I'm not.
Oh yeah, she's one of my best friends.
Yeah, and she's still in Philly, or is she back in?
Yep, she's in Philly, living the good life. Her and Mark Folletti, her partner, who owns a record store there now, called Latchkey.
Yeah, that sounds so. I was glad to hear that. Were you at the event in New York where both Lindsay and Amanda were there, and Dave got slightly inebriated? I forget if you were part of that or not, Rob. The
Uh,
Chestnut, right, Lindsay? I don't know.
possibly. I'm not sure.
Was that
Yeah.
the beer garden? Which incident was that?
Yeah, it was we started off at the Clover Club, and then I think that like Chestnut had like an outdoor like seating thing where we went. We probably did not need any more rounds after that, but we made the decision, and that was yeah. So Dave and Amy were there. So my own recollection of that evening is not especially crystalline, but
Yeah, I remember most of the times I've been drunk over the last 25 years, but that one's not really coming to mind. So I may have missed that one. So
yeah, so I forget if you were there or not. But anyway, but yeah, that's another thing about the sort of the connections we had among each other in those days, which was really interesting. So pick up the trajectory. So how there was a point in which obviously sort of Majikthise you eventually started working full time for another media outlet. It's so hard now to sort of reconstruct the timelines just by looking at
For a very brief time early in the Obama administration, I worked for the Washington Independent as a reporter. And then I ended up coming back, and I had to move to DC, and it was really kind of a difficult transition in terms of just moving, because Darcy was still here for the big band. So it didn't really work out. So I came back and continued freelancing. And
yeah, which makes sense. Are you guys still in Carroll Gardens? Or
we are, same apartment and everything.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, that's not always easy to do in New York. So that's awesome.
No, we found a good thing and we hung on to it.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. I still haven't claimed my roast beef dinner for the Flames beating.
I know. I want to make you a prime rib.
Next time I'm in New York, I will definitely. I will come by the apartment. I need to get out there, but anyway.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, well, so I was, and I may be misremembering this, and I may be misremembering this based on just sort of the point at which I became familiar with your work. But did you feel, so one of the themes that we talk about a lot in this series is that there were several specific eras to the blogosphere, even when the blogosphere still existed, right? There was sort of up to 2004, and I like to think it's like up to the 2004 election, where the two halves of what would become the ideological cleavings in the blogosphere still talked to one another, right? Even if they talked to one another in sort of really hostile fashion. But it was actual conversations. It was not just dunking on sort of angrily dunking on one another. And last week we had Russell Arvin Fox, and he and Dave Watkins talked a lot about sort of that period of the blogosphere. Where did you slot into that, right? By the time you were really getting going and engaged, was there still this sense that, you had to take seriously what Instapundit had to say about something, or were you sort of later when the entire ecosystem had shifted?
Well, there were some people that we still took seriously who were conservative, who were, say, experts on military affairs or combat veterans from Iraq, or people that had, at least for me, had some subject area, some of the law professors that had some subject area expertise that I could respect. And I was often very annoyed with the idea that we should be civil and engage with these people for the sake of engaging with them, because very often it felt like they had bad facts and bad faith, and it was just not productive.
Yeah. Are you suggesting that Glenn Reynolds is not always arguing good faith?
Shocking, I know.
Well, and Glenn was just one, right? But I mean, when you say like law professors, right, it immediately leaps to mind. I don't even know if they were professors or just lawyers, right? But those three guys from Minnesota, or at least one of them was from Minnesota. Powerline, yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, and it feels like, I would love to go back and, sort of read some of their stuff and see, would it be completely insane from their point of view, from the point of view of 2006, from there, to say that birthright citizenship is a controversial issue, right?
I'm sure it would have been. None of those guys would have thought that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But there was also Ann Altos.
Insidious racial politics, especially the Powerline guys. But no, I cannot imagine any of them ever thinking that you wouldn't be a citizen if you were born here. They would bitch and complain about anchor babies, of course, but they wouldn't do anything about it. It's in the Constitution.
Yeah, no, that really is a very new thing, even among winger circles. Like it's just remarkable how and not even the first Trump term, that was really other than John Eastman, I don't really remember anybody, floating that idea. Like that really is it really is. And there's going to be, I hope my friend Amanda Hollis-Brusky, who's written a great book about the Federalist Society, sort of tackles that, sort of production, really. And I know, since you're in healthcare, obviously one of the, the sort of classic examples of that is the ad hoc attempt to sort of find something unconstitutional about the Affordable Care Act, which ended up, launching on, the one part of the Affordable Care Act the conservatives had once supported. But it really is just remarkable how, that you sort of go from these just, fringe, dismissed positions to just conservative legal orthodoxy overnight. I was actually lucky because I debated the Affordable Care Act with a Federalist Society guy at Albany Law School. And literally the day before, Jeffrey Sutton had issued his ruling, which was basically, I don't like this any more than you do, but it's constitutional, which basically like took him off every Supreme Court shortlist forever doing that. But that just basically, I was just able to sit there and just read, the known Trotskyite Jeffrey Sutton points out that like every precedent is very, very obvious. But that was another sort of example of this sort of production of constitutional arguments essentially out of nothing, which is just this, becoming sort of more and more efficient. And again, it's not, you can't even say it's a triumph when you get 4 votes for the position that the Constitution doesn't mean what it says. Right. It's pretty, or conversely, the idea of the Supreme Court is like, deserves credit for standing up for Trump that's like, giving the Supreme Court credit for saying that Trump can't name 300 senators from Wyoming. It's it's better than the alternative, but it's not really, it's not exactly a triumph of judicial impartiality. So I know, obviously, given your interest in healthcare, that's something you've seen play out again and again as well.
Sure. And remember how much trouble we had convincing anyone that Roe was going to fall one day?
Oh, yes.
Yes, I tell people by far the most money I've ever been paid for a journalism article was the cover story, or not. It was not a cover story. It was, but sort of a central story in an issue of the American Prospect. The argument of which was, overruling Roe versus Wade would be very bad for reproductive rights, because at the time that was a heavily contrarian position. Like that's that's like cut against like all punditry. Yeah, and I also I wrote for one of the couple things I've written for Vox was again about how obviously Roe, that just going through like just how contingent the survival of Roe versus Wade was. Like Ronald Reagan did not want Robert Bork to be defeated. It was not a conspiracy.
Right.
Like George H.W. Bush did not nominate David Souter to preserve Roe. It was just basically some wingnuts of the Department of Justice got mad at Kenneth Starr for some reason. It was just like it was all this just series of flukes. But I will never forget the 2014 midterms when it's like Mark Udall was called by like mainstream media reporters Mark Uterus for suggesting that like Cory Gardner would vote to overrule Roe versus Wade. It's like whoops. But as you say, Lindsay, for it's better now, but in the 2000s, that was just the quickest way to get like $400 from an elite editor was to write some variation. There's 3 themes. Like Roe versus Wade is never going anywhere. Even if Roe does get overruled, it won't affect abortion rights at all. And whatever you think about abortion, you have to admit that the pro-life movement is this incredibly moral and consistent, movement that you have to genuflect to. It's like,
wait. No, Scott. The 4th one is you have to acknowledge that the reasoning in Roe versus Wade is extremely faulty and very bad judicial thinking, and that all critiques of that are in good faith.
Yes, yeah, and far below the normally extraordinarily high level of craftsmanship one gets from Supreme Court opinion. Yeah, yes, that's the other. Yeah, that's the and also my own hobby horse, which is that Roe versus Wade, abortion wouldn't even be a controversial issue in the United States had the Supreme Court not weighed in. That's the other. Just like for example, the Supreme Court hadn't decided anything about gay rights in the 70s, so Anita Bryant wasn't able to go to city councils and get things removed. That's just everybody understands this, right? So yeah, there's just like so much bad, but it's one of those things where, I don't know if you found this, Lindsay, but during the Trump era, basically I was right about things I wish I was wrong about and wrong about things I wish I was right about. So you don't even get the satisfaction of like, yes, I was right about that, but that doesn't make me feel good.
The huge catastrophe I repeatedly predicted came to pass. Yay me.
Right, yeah,
I
exactly.
failed to stop it.
Right, precisely.
Everybody loves being a Cassandra. Cassandra's, she's one of the happiest figures in Greek mythology.
Yes, but everyone forgets that Cassandra had an excellent track record. She was not the boy who cried wolf. Like she was consistent the whole time. But anyway, so take us up so during the so if you sort of fast forward to sort of the dissolution of what we now know as the political blogosphere, and then before the sort of quasi, so that we now have the return of blogs, although not the blogosphere, which we'll come back to, but that sort of middle period, let's call it late Obama, Trump, what were you up to then? Was that mostly freelancing? Did you have something that you would say was a blog, or was it pretty much just standard?
I may have tried to kind of resurrect the Majikthise. I don't remember how much I was updating it at that point, but mostly I was freelancing, and occasionally I get a bit of consulting work for various nonprofits, some pro-choice organizations, and things like that. Yeah, but it was mostly sort of work for hire stuff, like freelance journalism.
Now, how did you handle and again, I should probably know this, but I'm not recollecting. But whatever, we're here to talk about this, right? How did you handle the transition into the microblogging era? What people are calling the microblogging era, which is kind of Facebook, but really kicks off with the beginning of Twitter, right? Did you find that you sort of had a Reddit community there that wanted to listen to you based on sort of knowing you from the other space, or was it sort of just reinventing the wheel?
It was reinventing the wheel. I mean, I certainly did know a lot of people who were around from the blogging world, but a lot of people changed handles and things like that. So, it was always really nice when people would introduce themselves and say, "Hi, I was such and such in the blog world. Good to see you again." But yeah, Twitter was. I dove right into Twitter, and it was kind of moderately successful. I seemed to have a hard limit of about 20,000 followers, and it was really fun. And I was sad when it died.
Yeah, I think there is a general. Well, I don't know. There's never any general consensus, but there is. I don't think it's a super controversial belief, even on Blue Sky now, that whatever Blue Sky may be, and I have lots of complaints about Blue Sky, right? It's not sort of golden age Twitter, right? Where you did have kind of cool things happening and cool people listening, and there was always something new which could come up, and there was sort of a fun aspect to it.
And there was this huge depth of expertise on every single random topic, and the search was functional. So you get people, you just ask a question, and somebody who's, a brain surgeon or a plastics engineer or something else in the top of their field would just happen along and give you real knowledge, and you could find lots of sources there. And there was always the chance that the people you were talking about would hear you, whether you tagged them or not.
Right, or that somebody like John Cena would intervene in the conversation and say something interesting, right? So,
yeah, no, it really was. Yeah, it's always that was when it was still like a more functional community. Just the odds that you would get just some random celebrity will find your tweet, or it was a very and again, I think that it was never a stable equilibrium, and probably it wouldn't have held up fully even without the sort of disastrous Elon acquisition. But people do forget how cool that, and also worked as a breaking news site in the way that it absolutely does not anymore.
Yeah.
And that is sort of I think that for me anyway. And I think Rob may be somewhat different, but Blue Sky has more or less replicated the sort of conversations I have among other liberals, but it has not really replaced partly because it doesn't have a usable search format at all, and it's really just not a great breaking news site because mainstream media organizations won't join it. So we really don't have anywhere that replicates that. And then I don't even understand exactly what Threads is at this. That's this is exactly the kind of conversations that the old blogosphere used to have, right? Which I think is that we think of a lot of obviously debates about partisan controversy, the blogosphere being sort of early adopters on, the Iraq War being bad and Bush being bad before that was mainstream. But as you, I think, captured earlier, Lindsay, there's also this sort of subject matter expertise that you have, both professional historians and political scientists, but also just kind of ordinary people with an interest in these subjects, and so you could also get debates about the history of impeachment, all these sort of institutional histories, how to look at that, which I think was one thing that was really fascinating. And again, I think Rob is right that you also got some of that during the best of the microblogging era as well. But I think it was really the height of the political, blogosphere, and it didn't always work like this, but where you could get sort of contemporary, political arguments with sort of a lot more, historical and background than you would get from just ordinary journalism. So I don't know if you found that, but that was
and it ended up being a really good way of driving the conversation in the media, because a lot of editors were commissioning articles based on things that people wrote. So you could write something you felt like you might want to write for the Prospect, and then sometimes the Prospect editor would reach out and ask you to do it, or you could then work it into a pitch.
Right. Yeah. And I think, and the way that you just described it, Scott, right, and actually, I think it's very interesting to me, right, because everybody blames Google right now, and correctly is, sort of criticizing Google and really every other search engine for basically fucking up search, right? That you can't search for anything on the internet anymore, right? And in part because, but one of the differences between now and 2005 is that on 2005, there really wasn't very much on the internet, right? There wasn't a Wikipedia page about every single event that has ever happened in history that is detailed and sourced out. And so, in sort of creating the sort of repository of human knowledge that we now enjoy, and that in some ways AI is taking advantage of, and I mean that in sort of the most negative way. Right, a lot of that material was sort of created during this period of the early blogosphere, when you had scholars, non-scholars, professionals, like journalists, lots of people writing what were not 140 character takes, but were sort of real long form treated arguments about major political issues. And I think that gets to why people really miss that era, right? Because there was something very interesting to it. I want to digress one more time here. Have you guys read that article, the New Republic article, claiming that sort of progressive and lefty punditry has been ruined by the historians?
No, I haven't even heard about it.
Oh yeah, no. Said basically that I will.
Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I'm sorry. The scholar of religion who wrote it.
Yeah.
Weird aside about the Treaty of Tripoli.
Yeah, no, and it was like, wow, you have all these historians who are taking over lefty and progressive punditry, and none of them are radicals, and all of them believe in American exceptionalism. And it's like,
so I assume this is cost rich. Oh, because I saw Kevin Cruz.
Yes.
Cruz but didn't link it. So that's the article. So I've read
Kevin Cruz, Mr. Manifest Destiny. I mean, he's all he does is criticize, write about the dark side of the American project.
Yeah, and our own Loomis, right? He wasn't cited, but he was exactly the kind of person that this woman was talking about, and like none of it made any sense at all. It was crazy.
I think that the thesis, it sort of misbranded itself as being about American exceptionalism, as opposed to the audacity that progressives or leftists could find anything in our founding traditions, see any of our values reflected in our founding traditions. And I just think that's an ahistorical take, that our progressive beliefs didn't come out of nowhere, and they come from, aspects of the American tradition too. And it's not saying that America was chosen by God to rule the world, to say, no, there are things in the founding documents, there are trends in American history, there are patterns that we are drawing on today that are liberal or leftist, that we have an intellectual heritage that traces back too.
Yeah, this is taking back to the debates that Kimberly Crenshaw had with like other crits in the 70s. Is like, you should stop using rights because they can be a counter hegemonic force. It's like, yeah, compared to what? like like what is this discourse that can like never be used by like powerful, so it's like, yeah, like you're asking us to give up something that's been useful and like replace it with what, like this magical like discourse that is completely untainted by power is just like, it's just done, right? So it's like, if you're interested in like winning politics, like the move is to say, is to say that like, the Declaration, reflects something, real, as an aspiration, and obviously it involved a lot of hypocrisy in that, but that's the fact that it wasn't a complete sham is what is also a given leverage for political movements in the past, and it's like just sort of giving that up, like what is that,
Like we are a very high concept Enlightenment republic founded by slaveholders. And we can focus, we can look at the ideas and how radical they were and appreciate that without saying that without endorsing the people or everything they did.
And especially when it comes to the Reconstruction amendments, like actually, I think we can see useful aspiration there. Like I really do, it's
Absolutely.
like when you're talking about the modern American founding, you're really talking, more about Sumner and Stevens than you are about, Jefferson and Madison. And again, that's and again, there's also, plenty of room for like, critique and, but this idea that, you just sort of abandon any, talk of, of these sort of traditions. The Cito Nuio's book is actually really good in terms of that the way out of this, it's a republic, not a democracy, is to say that actually Republican government is a very valuable thing, which the current American state is massively far away from actually like providing. But you can sort of that you can actually have a pretty radical critique of the current constitutional order that still like looks to sort of some of these ideals. And again, that just is if you're interested in like advancing political aims, that's obviously going to be a more effective technique. But anyway, I'm glad we have this mystery solved, because again, the historians that were targeted for obvious reasons didn't want to provide a link to the article. So I'm like, what is this shit? Like, what is
none of the historians cited, to my mind, had anything to do with American exceptionalism.
Yeah,
it was weird.
Yeah, that just seems like sort of somebody has an idea and just like hooks 5 random people into it and just and I guess back to it. I was. It's fitting that we did this because I actually, for the first time in months, if not years, had the occasion to think about Freddie DeBoer again, because apparently it was yesterday he wrote this article about, of course, Graham Plattner is victim of a coordinating rat fucking campaign, which he doubled down on earlier this week. Yeah, good.
Did he name AIPAC as the villain?
I don't know, but probably, but that was just this like among others. See, this is why we need historians, because there's among other things, like rat fucking is actually like a very specific term. It doesn't refer to like negative story about a politician you like.
Right.
Like, it's very specific. It's like there's not it's not. But anyway, I was kind of heartened to see people making fun of that. So I was like, this was really taking us back to the old school. But I have resisted actually blogging about it, so that's sort of there's a line there, and I'm like, that's it. I think blue sky. We don't really need to.
It's been a minute since Freddie has appeared on the blog in any sort of fashion. So, part of one of the things this conversation has done for me is to sort of bring up, how digital. Sort of relationships established in the digital space bleed into meat space, right? Now, for Lawyers, Guns, and Money, at least at the beginning, that it was the opposite, right? So, we formed a blog because we knew each other in the meat space. Eventually Eric, we brought him in, but we knew him. I've known him since, undergraduate at Oregon. And then other people like Paul Camposens, for example, he was a sort of a digital hire. But what is interesting here in listening to the two of you talk is that really for groups of bloggers, and I think this would be true of sort of the DC set, but it would also be true of the New York set here, that the digital relationships became physical meat space kinds of relationships in really productive ways. So I don't know, you, Scott, were in New York for a large part of your blogging career, and Lindsay, you have been there almost the entire time, with the exception of sometimes in DC. But so what other things in sort of real life did blogging open up for you in terms of meeting people, sort of in real cafes and real bars?
I've made essentially all my closest friends now are people that I met through blogging. That there's some folks from the Three Quarks blog that I threw out a random invitation to my birthday at my 27th birthday at the beer garden in Queens, and the Three Quarks crew came, and we've been super close friends ever since. And then another very close friend of mine, Isaac Butler, used to blog at Parabasis, and he's the one person to ever really recognize me from that Johnny Cash picture in public. Wow. So we ended up becoming really good friends, and he collaborated with Darcy, my partner, to put on the Brooklyn Babylon show at BAM. And so, yeah, I mean, and of course, it was my friendship with Scott, my friendship with Amanda, who's one of my best friends in the world. It's, essentially all my closest friends are from the blogosphere, except, childhood friends and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you also know we were several, and you also knew Jessica Valenti as well, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's somebody we're still hoping to get on.
Yeah, she has some great stories.
Right, and not only are there going to be great stories, but she was also in the news again, right? Because somebody resurfaced a Ryan Grimm post from 2007 about how it was actually her fault that she has breasts. Right.
Oh, I remember that.
I always remember Ann Althouse's role in that, obviously, but I'd forgotten that was a Ryan Grimm thing too.
Me too. I'd forgotten that scummy tie-in.
Yeah. No, it was like, oh yeah, you've been sketchy for a long time.
Yeah. That's really that was just that is just a everything about that was just I miss Sadly No too. That's one of the,
right.
That's the kind of thing they were great at. But like putting yakety sax on Ann Althouse video blogs, just like
they were ahead of their time.
The role they were born to play. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and that was again, there was sort of definitely interesting. Those communities that were sort of were formed in New York at that time. I think it was a really and again we sort of had our sort of our regular meet at the Ginger Man. So yeah, we had people from Unfogged would come by, like various, or if people were visiting from out of town, that was a really that was a fun time. And again, it died out, and also there was also the meeting we what was it, Julia from Sisyphus Shrugged used to have us out in what was that, like, it was like past Jamaica. I forget what that neighborhood in Queens was called.
Yeah, I forget too, but it was a long subway ride out, and then someone would come pick us up, and we'd all come up to the
it's like you took the E train to the end of the line, and then it was still a 20-minute drive. Like it was about as
But she had the most beautiful backyard with wonderful trees, and all the bloggers would gather around, and we'd barbecue and hang out, and it was really fun.
Wow.
Yeah. No, yeah, that was really cool. So yeah, so it was so this is we're back in the back it was a special time in a lot of ways, and in part because of the personal connections. And so I guess that's the sort of final thing that sort of that we've sort of done for all of these, which is definitely sort of Substack and Beehive, which my favorite football blogger has moved to, and these other that it shows that there is value in blogging. That's sort of never gone away, but has really revived this idea again of sort of writers and subject matter experts at a time when there's so few jobs in journalism that there's still an interest in that, but it's also different in that, again, it's not a community. And again, I know they're trying to replicate some elements of the conversation with the Substack shorts and that kind of social media, but it's not, hasn't worked yet. I don't know if it ever will. So, like, Lindsay, how do you see that? Do you think that the revival of blogging is good in some ways? Do you think it's just sort of radically different than the old blogosphere? Do you see some of it coming back? How do you kind of see this kind of?
It feels very different, but also. I mean, like you said, there's the subject matter expertise and the independent creator aspect of it. And one thing I think that the Substack era has made really good is the ability to monetize your platform easily. That was one of the things that I think that killed the old blogosphere, was that it was virtually impossible to monetize your work as an independent blogger at the beginning. There was blog ads, but I think at the absolute peak of blog ads, and this was a fluke, it was $500 a month.
Right.
in ad revenue. So
remember the Idaho like Boomershoot Festival or whatever? I guess like very happy to get that like $500 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's a good thing about Substack. I'm actually kind of wrestling about whether I'm going to start a Substack of my own about conspiracy theories and how they relate to American politics. I'm working on a book on that topic, and I'm worried people are going to yell at me because of the Nazi angle, and I'm struggling with the ethics of whether it's okay to have a Substack. What do you do?
You know, I'm, and you could also, again, like my, you know, like, yeah, like I know, like, again, like, you know, people have moved also on to like be, you know, like, I could find out where like Mike 10 years moved. You know, I'm not myself all that. I just like what social media owner has their hands clean. Like, to me, if you want a Substack, I would go ahead personally. But I think there are also like alternatives, you know, that could still allow for monetization. I think the one thing to be careful about, my understanding is that some of the new platforms make it very difficult to migrate subscriber lists. Like one thing about Substack is that like you do own your own list and can keep it. And my understanding is that people have had some trouble with some of the newer sites, so that's something you'd want to look into. But if you, but I may be the wrong person to ask. But if you ask me, no,
I mean,
I don't really see it as being unethical, but
I mean,
many smart people have reached the opposite conclusion, and I won't claim to like have researched this in the depth necessary. So, you know, I don't want to push you, but if whatever of these platforms you decide to join, please let us know, and we will.
I certainly will.
Right. I mean, myself, it's like, no, you know, I'm sensitive to the concerns about the ownership of the site and the other people who are on the site, but I also feel at the same time that there is a tendency among progressives to self-segregate them out of themselves, out of the mainstream. Something that I actually do find, which is one of the continuous reasons why Blue Sky is a perpetual annoyance to me. But I'm also, and Scott, I don't think I told you this, right? But I'm going to start a Substack soon, which is going to be all in Kentucky politics, right? Which is something that fundamentally most people at LGM just don't care about. And so, you know, and sort of within the universe of people talking about Kentucky politics, there are lots of people on Substack, right? So to not be on Substack would be a handicap in that space.
I've thought of starting one up, but like which I briefly started, like started a Substack devoted to like the worst Supreme Court decisions in history. You know, it's like I'm toying with that. And I don't really need to make much money, but you know, just something. And then,
that's great from a marketing perspective to have a very targeted pitch.
Yeah, and then I could still link to them from Emily. So I'm not undermining the blog. I would still like link to the post from LGM, but it would just sort of be, you know, a little bit longer form to sort of be a bit of an interesting, you know, to sort of allow me to, you know, sort of take advantage of this of this research. So that is something I'm toying with myself. So we'll all have to we'll all have to have like virtual drinks and discuss where to take go.
So Lindsay, the question I always ask at this point is, you know, it's fundamentally, why did the old blogosphere die? Right. And the answer that people have given has really run the gamut. Right. There are some people who have said, well, it didn't. Right. It's still around, sort of. Right. In a way. So, you know, other people have said the death of Google Reader, the emergence of Twitter, the emergence of Facebook. Russell Arbin Fox was on last week, and he was very straightforward. He's like, smartphones, right? Smartphones, which he apparently doesn't even have one, right? He had to buy one because his university has moved to dual-factor authentication. And so the first time in his life, he has to own a smartphone because otherwise he can't get into his office computer. But sort of putting that question to you, you know, what do you think either killed or forced the blogosphere, the old blogosphere that we were all part of, to transition, right? What was it that did the murder?
I think in large part we became the media, or we became politics in the circles that I was part of. I mean, there may be other answers for other aspects of the blogosphere, but in our community, I think it was that the blogosphere became a launching pad. So a lot of people became journalists. Initially, a lot of people got hired, blogs got bought. Then people became journalists, became TV hosts, became commentators. And also on the political side, there are a lot of people that I knew in the blogosphere who are now either campaign pros or politicians themselves, like Chris Rabb's a congressman now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that would be, and I think that is pretty much the same answer that Matt Iglesias gave way back when, was that it just sort of, it professionalized, right? That, it sifted out the top talent, or in some cases, maybe not the top talent, but and just sort of became a more professional space and more consistent and coherent in the new media landscape, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, and Lindsay, I think you've also gotten us a great insight too about monetization. That like now, Matt makes like much more money like on his blog than he did, as a Vox co-founder. So that that things might have been very different. If there had been a way, or if there had been norms that just allowed people to sort of charge for, that also could have changed things. Although, again, the problem is that paywalls also, that part of what made the old blogosphere work is that you could have conversations because there were no paywalls. So it still would have been different. But basically he couldn't survive because like nobody could make a living blogging with, very few exceptions. Whereas now you could. So that I think is sort of an interesting.
It was this kind of unstable arrangement where you were developing, relatively marketable skills and in a pursuit that was essentially non-monetizable. So it was just inevitable that people were going to be picked off by employers, essentially, that could actually pay them for their work.
Right. Yeah, and then it's not a coincidence that like the blogs that have survived like ours are ones where it's not our day job. Like that's really the only way to that right. They could keep going. But for people whose like primary job was actually writing, it just was not a viable way of you had to get some other professional job within the field. That was sort of and again, so that'll be interesting to see where now that like you can monetize blogs, and again it's still a bit of a winner take all economy, but still it's more open than it used to be. I mean, I do think that is also creating some interesting possibilities, and apparently allowing historians to destroy liberalism in America or something.
Yeah. I mean, I like Loomis, like, I can't get in on this. I hate America, right?
Exactly.
Why am I not quoted here?
Exactly. Well, we've got about we may actually like keep to our pledge to try to keep this within roughly an hour. But Lindsay, please plug everything that you're up to now.
Okay, well, I write a column for the editorial board /alternate, and
John, I actually gave a guest lecture at John's class at Yale once. Very nice. So I forgot you were supposed to. That's a cool project.
Shout out to John Storr, the best boss in journalism, yes. And I'm also working on a book right now which is about how conspiracy theories took over American politics and how they're essentially a backlash to the Enlightenment. The working title is Against the Light. And I've got an agent and it's out with publishers right now. So I'm hoping to get a book contract fairly soon.
Oh, so this is pretty close to being done. That's very cool.
Hopefully I'll have something more to report next time.
Excellent. Well, and definitely when I'm just going to say when, if not if it comes out, and we should definitely do one of these again because that sounds great. We should also mention that Lindsay's partner, Darcy James Argu, both has a fairly recent outstanding album, Dynamic Maximum Tension, and he arranged the new album by the great jazz singer Cecile Moran-Salvant, which just came out, which is also fantastic. So if you're have any taste for both big band jazz and more traditional jazz, check those out as well. You will not be disappointed. So plenty of things to check out.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. So anyway, did you have anything else, Rob?
No, I'm good.
Excellent. Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a real pleasure. We really love the series. And again, it has been too long since I've been to New York City, so I will try the best I can to get out there.
Come have steak at my house.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we need to have steak and grab a beer like old times. So so hope everything is well out there. Thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck with your book project.
Thanks. Great weekend, guys.
Yeah, same to you. And to everybody, thank you so much for listening. Again, please consider subscribing to our Patreon. That's sort of what allows us to continue to do these. So we really appreciate everybody who stepped up and was generous this time. And we will be back soon with another edition of the Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you again for listening to the Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast. We would like to thank Elizabeth Nelson of The Paranoid Style for supplying as our intro and outro music I'd Bet My Lands and Titles, a track on the album For Executive Meeting. If you would like to support the Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast or any other aspect of the Lawyers, Guns, and Money project, please visit us at www.patreon.com/lawyersgunsandmoney or donate at the PayPal link on the website. Thank you.